Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Alef, Parshas Tetzaveh, Sicha Alef. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learn of the command to take Shemen Zayis Zoch Kosis Lamor for lighting the menorah in the Mishkan. And we learn the Rashi on this. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 7 questions on this Rashi. Number 2, present a key to what is really bothering Rashi. Number 3, based on this, answer all 7 questions. And number 4, present the Inyanim Ufloim in Halacha and the Yena Shel Torah in this Rashi. On the beginning of our Parsha, where it says, Va'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael, V'yikchu Ilecha Shemen Zayis Zoch Kosis Lamor, and you should command the Yidden, and they should bring to you Shemen Zayis Zoch Kosis Lamor. So Rashi quotes the words Va'ata Tetzaveh and Zoch, and Rashi explains Bli Shmorim, without sediment, K'may Shaninu b'Menachos, like we learned in Menachos, Megargerei Bereish Hazayis, he picks it from the top of the olive tree, V'chulu, etc. And there are 7 questions here. Number 1, from the fact that Rashi doesn't explain that Zoch means clean. Rashi doesn't say Zoch, Naki, it means clean. So this indicates that it's known that Zoch means Naki. Zoch means clean. And Rashi is only explaining what it's clean of. It's clean of sediment. Bli shmarim, without any sediment. But the question on that is that that's obvious. Because if we know that Zoch means Naki, that it's clean, obviously it means it's clean of everything, including clean of sediment. So why does Rashi have to say anything at all? Number 2, later in Parshas Kisisa, we also have the word Zaka. It says Levaina Zaka, and over there Rashi doesn't say anything. And the question is, if over here Rashi has to tell us what it's clean of, also over there he should tell us what it's clean of. Number 3, and this is built on what we said in question number 1, that the fact that it's clean of shmarim is obvious. So the third question is, why is there any need for a proof to this? If the idea is so simple, why does Rashi have to bring a proof for it? And he says, Rashi does bring a proof. He says, K'may Shaninu, like we learned. Why does he need this proof? Number 4, Rashi doesn't bring proofs from halacha, and Gemara talks about the halacha. So even if a proof is needed, however, we'll explain why there's a need for it. How does it help to bring a proof from the portion of Torah that talks about halacha to what Rashi teaches, which is Pshuta Shel Mikra? Such a proof is usually not effective because it's 2 different ways of learning things. So even if a proof is needed, how does it help to bring a proof from the Gemara? Number 5, Rashi only quotes from the Gemara Menachos the words Megargerei Bereish Hazayis, that he picks it from the top of the olive tree. And he only hints to what seems to be the main word, V'kaitish, that he crushes it. That seems to be the main word. As Rashi says in the next Dibra Maschel, V'kaitish b'machteshes, he crushes it with a crusher, which means that he crushes it that the oil should come out. Ve'enei teichanan berachayim, but he doesn't grind it in a mill, because then the actual pieces of the olive will go into the oil, like Rashi says, in order that there shouldn't be shmarm in it. So it would seem that the key word to indicate that there's no shmarm in it is the word v'kaitish. So why is it that the words that he picks it from the top of the olive tree, Rashi writes clearly, and what seems to be the main word v'kaitish, that he crushes it, that Rashi only hints to by saying v'chulu, etc. Number 6, why does Rashi say K'may Shaninu b'Menachos? Why doesn't he just say K'may Shaninu? Like we learned, why does he have to mention Menachos? And this question becomes greater because in Parshas Emer, where we also learn about this mitzvah, it says Tzaveh Bnei Yisrael v'yikchu Ilecha Shemen Zayis Zoch Kosis Lamor. So over there, where Rashi talks about the Shemen, there he references both Menachos and Teres Kehanim. So how come here Rashi writes anything at all? And when he is writing something, he writes only Menachos and not Teres Kehanim. And number 7, why does Rashi also quote the words Va'ata Tetzaveh? He's only coming to explain to us what the word Zach means. And the Rebbe explains that from the fact that Rashi does quote the words Va'ata Tetzaveh, that indicates that the proof that Zach means Bli Shmarim, without sediment, is from the words Va'ata Tetzaveh. And the difficulty is, How do the words Va'ata Tetzaveh prove that? And on the other hand, if they do effectively prove that, then why is there any need to bring an additional proof from Menachos? Now we're going to move on to the key of the Sicha, which in a Rashi Sicha, the key of the Sicha is very often, as it is in this Sicha as well, the key of the Sicha is to understand that there's something here that's bothering Rashi that we weren't aware of. There's actually a question over here that we didn't notice, that's the question that Rashi is coming to answer with this Pirush here. And what this usually does for us is two things. Number one, it then helps us understand Rashi, because when we see what it is that's bothering Rashi, then we could understand why he says what he says, because it's by saying that he answers that question. And number two, we get to see the way Rashi answers the question, which is very often not how we understood it originally. It gives us a whole new way of understanding the discussion here in the Torah based on Rashi's explanation. So in our case, the explanation of all of this is as follows. In the pasuk it says, Shemen Zayis Zoch Kosis. And the word kosis refers to the word zayis. What type of zayis? A zayis that's kosis, that's crushed. And according to this, it's difficult to say that the word zoch, which is written in between the word zayis and kosis, it separates the two words zayis and kosis that are connected. So it's difficult to say that this word that's inserted in the middle refers to the previous word shemen, that it's shemen zoch. So then why is the word zoch in between zayis and kosis? If it's referring to the shemen, then it should have said shemen zayis kosis zoch, which means shemen of a zayis kosis, a crushed olive, zoch, and that is pure. Although we can say bedoichak that it's saying the shemen has to be number one of a zayis and number two zoch, and the way it was done was through kosis. But it's a deichek to say that. And since it says shemen zayis zoch kosis, the word zoch is in between the zayis and the kosis, so we should have to explain it like the Evan Ezra indeed explains it, that the word zoch does not refer to the shemen, but rather the word zoch refers to the zayis. So the pasuk is saying shemen zayis, and about the zayis has to be two things. Number one, zoch, and number two, kosis. And what does zoch mean? It means that it has to be an olive that's not ruined, it's not moldy, it wasn't bitten by a bird or something else. It's a whole and non-rotting zayis. So this is what it would seem that we have to say. And now this leads into the answer of the 7 questions. We'll see right at the beginning. We're going to answer the first 2 questions. And Rashi is coming to negate this when he says bli shmarim. That Rashi is not telling us that it means clean. He's not telling us what it's clean of. He's telling us that the word zoch goes on the shemen, not on the zayis. It's going on the oil. The oil has to be zoch, not the olive has to be zoch. Since bli shmarim can only apply to the shemen and not to the zayis. So when Rashi is saying bli shmarim, what he's saying is that the word zoch means without sediment, which means it's referring to the oil, it's not referring to the olive. So that's why Rashi is telling us what it's clean of, not in order to tell us the oil is clean of sediment, but to tell us that the word clean goes on the oil. And that's also why on Levaina Zaka there's no need to explain anything. It means exactly what it sounds like, that it's clean. And now we're going to answer the last question. Why does Rashi quote the words Va'ata Tetzaveh? So in order to prove that Zoch refers to the shemen, that when it says Zoch, that it's pure, it's talking about the oil and not the olive, even though it's difficult to say this, like we just said, because the way the wording is in the pasuk. So therefore Rashi also quotes the words Va'ata Tetzaveh. Those words Va'ata Tetzaveh prove to us that Zoch refers to the shemen and not to the zayis. How does it prove it to us? Because this command, Va'ata Tetzaveh, was given to the Yidden while they were in the desert, which is a place where olives don't grow. And so we must say that they brought oil with them when they left Mitzrayim. And it would seem the reason they brought oil and not olives is because oil could stay in good condition for the amount of time that the Yidden were in the Midbar, in the desert, for 40 years, but not olives. And so if they had with them oil and not olives, so this proves that we can't say that zach refers to the zayis, to the olive, because here what they have in front of them is the oil, and it's impossible to determine from the shemen, from the oil that they had, if the zayis it came from was zach. Now they have oil. How do they know what olive this oil came from? Was the olive bitten or not? It's impossible to determine that. But they could be told regarding the oil that they have that it should be zach from any sediment. So that's Rashi's proof that when it says zach in the pasuk, it refers to the shemen, to the oil, and not to the zayis, to the olive. Now we can add another point here for why Rashi quotes the words Va'ata Tetzaveh. A Talmud Memulach, a seasoned student, will claim that it's still better to explain that Zach refers to the Zayis, because that's how it fits better in the wording. And what about the question we just had, that there's an obligation of Zayis Zach that they couldn't do in the Midbar, because they only had oil and not olives? So he'll explain that the obligation that the Zayis be Zach was only once they entered Eretz Yisrael, and then they could get those types of olives. And this is another reason why Rashi quotes the words Va'ata Tetzaveh, since it hints to the teaching that Rashi says in Parshas Tzav that Ein Tzav Elo Miyad Uladeris, that the word Tzav means that it's for something that's immediately now and for future generations. And even though Rashi typically doesn't refer to teachings that the student didn't learn yet, however, here we're not talking about a regular student, we're talking about a Talmud Memulach, the question of a seasoned student. And to answer those types of questions, Rashi will allude to something that we didn't yet learn. Now we're going to move on to answer questions 3, 4, and 5. So after all of this, we can say that, however, it's still not a complete proof, since b'daichik we can say that the Yidden knew they would be given this mitzvah to use oil from olives that are zach, that the olives are zach, and they brought with them oil from such olives when leaving Mitzrayim. Now it's a daichik, it would seem, because it's a daichik to say that they knew this level of detail about the mitzvah. But since b'daichik we can say this, so therefore Rashi brings a proof from what it says in Menachos. And what does he bring from Menachos? That megargere bereish hazayis, that he picks it from the top of the olive tree. The reason Rashi brings these words is since the olives on the top of the tree have clear oil. The oil from those olives is clear. But regarding the olives themselves, those olives are actually more likely to be bitten by birds. If we want olives that are zach, it would be from the middle of the tree, because the olives from the top of the tree are likely to be bitten by birds, and the olives at the bottom of the tree are likely to be touched by people. So since it says he takes it from the top of the tree, so this fits with the shemen being zach, since that oil is clearer, and not with the zayas being zach. And so questions 3, 4, and 5 are answered. Why is there a need for a proof? Because there's something that we could say b'deichak. And that also explains why you could bring a proof from halacha, because it's not a proof from halacha for the basic explanation of Rashi. That we have from the words Va'ata Tetzaveh. It's only to answer a question that itself is only b'deichak. And that's why Rashi quotes the words megargere bereish hazayis, because that's what indicates that the oil has to be zach, because that oil is better, but not the olives have to be zach, because those olives are actually likely to be bitten. And to answer our sixth question of why does Rashi say that it's taught in Menachos, you could just say it was taught. Why does he have to say that it's in Menachos, especially since in Parshas Emer he brings the source both from Menachos and Teres Kainim? So the reason why Rashi specifies that it's in Menachos, since in Teres Kainim it brings the opinion that they crush the olives, which doesn't fit with our Rashi here that says Bli Shmarim. So therefore he brings the source from Menachos, where in the Mishnah over there it doesn't mention this other opinion. So Rashi is telling us that it's in Menachos and not in Teres Kainim, since in Teres Kainim there's an opinion that doesn't fit with the way Rashi teaches it over here, that they brought oil without shmarim. And regarding the difference between our Parsha and Parshas Emer, that in our Parsha Rashi doesn't include this opinion, whereas in Parshas Emer he does, so this fits in our Parsha, not to mention Teres Kainim, and to say that the oil was without shmarim, which our Parsha was by the Chanukas HaMishkan, when they certainly did things in the best possible way. So they didn't crush the olives and have pieces of the olives in the oil, which is not so in Parshas Emer, where there it's not talking about the Chanukas HaMishkan. There it's teaching about the halachas with all their details. So then it's appropriate to mention more than just the best possible way of doing things, but all the different ways. So therefore Rashi also mentions Teres Kainim to allude to the fact that there are other opinions, because that's what the Parsha is doing there in Emor, teaching us the general halachas, how it's always supposed to be, and not just at the time of the Chanukas HaMishkan. Now we're going to move on to what we could learn from this. So from the Inyanim of Floim and Halacha that we find in our Rashi, so the Rambam rules regarding what we give to Hashem, what we give to mitzvahs. So Nemer Batera veHevel Chulu Umechalvein Chulu. It says in the Torah that Hevel brought from the very best. That's what he brought his carbon from. And we learn from there, Kol Davar Shehu L'Shem Hakel HaToiv, anything that is for the name of Hakel HaToiv, Sheyiyeh Min HaNov HaToiv, it should be from the nice and the good. Im Bona Beis Tefillah, if a person is building a Beis Tefillah, Yiyeh No Mi Beis Yeshivasei, it should be nicer from the place where he lives. Hechil Rayev Chulu, if he feeds a hungry person. Kisa Arum, if he clothes a naked person. Hikdish Davar Chulu, if he gives something to Hekdesh. V'cheinu Eimer, and he concludes, and so does it say, Kol Chelev La Hashem, all the Chelev, the very choicest should be for Hashem. There's a question over here whether if this obligation of Kol Chelev La Hashem also applies while preparing the item that will be given afterwards to Hashem. Like, does one have to purchase a choice piece of wool to make a garment for a person? Or does it only apply when the person's choosing which item to give? And there are two ways of looking at it. One is that the obligation of Kol Chelev La Hashem only takes effect at the time of giving, because that's when it's being given to Hashem. Kol Chelev La Hashem is referring to when the person is actually ready to give it. Or we can say the obligation of Kol Chelev La Hashem takes effect from the moment the person decides that it will be for Hashem. And even in this itself, there are two ways. One is to say that the moment the person decides that he's going to give something to Hashem, he has to make it in the best possible way, regardless of whether that benefit, taking the better way, will have any benefit at the end. Another way is that no, that's only if at the end it'll result in a better product. So we have over here two different ways of looking at it. Now, according to the Even Ezra, we see it takes effect from preparing it, because he says the olive has to be a choice olive, even if it doesn't have a benefit in the oil that comes out afterwards. So we see that it takes it the second way, that it's even from preparing and even when there's no benefit. However, according to Rashi, the obligation only takes effect at the time of giving. Rashi says the oil that's being given, that's what has to be pure. And there's no concern about the time of preparation. So we see over here Rashi's opinion when it comes to halacha, that when it says Kol Chelev La Hashem, it refers to what the person is actually giving and not what the person is preparing. And now from Yenushal Torah in our Rashi, so it's explained to the Chassidus that there are two aspects in a zayis. There's two different ways of looking at the zayis that are actually opposite of one another. On a simple level, the bitterness of the zayis, it's a bitter food, so that represents the bitterness and darkness of Sitra Achra, of the Klippa. And it's only through crushing the zayis that you can remove the shemen, which represents Chachma, which is the bittul to Hashem. So if you want to successfully extract and reach Chachma and have bittul to Hashem, it's only through crushing the zayis, crushing the Sitra Achra. However, on a deeper level, the zayis is the source of the shemen, meaning that it's higher than the shemen. It's not Sitra Achra, it's actually even greater than the shemen itself, which is Chachma and bittul, meaning that the bitterness and darkness represents the very high level of Keser, which is above revelation. And that's why it's called darkness, because it transcends any form of revelation. So we have two different ways of looking at the zayis. Does it represent Klippa and Sitra Achra that has to be crushed in order for a person to come to a place of Chachma and Bittul? Or does the zayis represent a level that's higher than the Chachma and Bittul? It's completely transcendent of any type of revelation, and therefore it has a bitterness, a darkness, because it can't be tasted in a revealed form. And it's from there that the Chachma and Bittul comes out. And this is the difference between the Even Ezra and Rashi when we talk about on a deeper level. The Even Ezra explains it simply, because he explains Pshat, that the darkness of the Zayis comes from Sitra Achra. And therefore, care has to be paid to choose a zayis that can give shemen. And so the zayis itself must be zach. We have to make sure we have a good zayis. However, in Rashi, which is Yenushal Torah, which means you get the deeper parts of Torah found in Rashi, at least are hinted to in Rashi, the deeper things shine through. And so the darkness of the Zayis relates to its high level, and therefore there's no concern by the Zayis. The Zayis, we have nothing to worry about. It's the level of Keser. It is completely safe and protected of anything negative. It has no relationship to anything negative. It doesn't have to be protected from it. And the only concern is that the Shemen, the Chachman Bittul, that's already a revealed experience, there's a concern that it should be Zach.